Ndi koluba bone botovela midia vatu Tshivhase bone bo Tshivhasa midia vatu yabo ya sala yo tshena ndiri nda kha vhakololo vhoṱhe vhe vha vha hone hafha namusi. Ndi tama u dovha nda khoda vho Tshifularo, Lusunzi mpharalala, masea khole mbiluni zwisiho, na vhone vho Nthambeleni la luaname la mankili mankili, na vhone vho Netshituni musi wa ḓuvhatsi duhulu la matundi, ndiri ahendou mulila tshikadzi. Ndi sa hangwi na vho Tshilidzi Marwala, hoyu ndi ene dzulani zwaṋu musi na ndevhe a tshi vhona. In 1969, inside a town hall in the city of Kampala, Uganda, during a fierce debate on the role of African intellectuals in the African Revolution, one of the most erudite African scholars, the late Ali Mazrui, proffered a memorable definition of what an African intellectual is. A person who has the capacity to be fascinated by ideas and has acquired the skill to handle many of them effectively. Such are the four accomplished scholars whom we have come to honor here today, each one of them on the cutting edge of their disciplines. Dr. Buchilo Netshituni-Loff is one of a kind, a world-class pediatric oncologist and the head of the only pediatric oncology unit in the Limpopo province. Prof. Mashudu Tshifularo is more than an ordinary ear specialist. He is an innovator, a disruptor, and a trailblazer who performed the world's first middle ear 3D transplant. Dr. Nthambeleni, one of the finest sociologists in this country. I stand in awe of the magnificent way in which Dr. Nthambeleni is currently leading the University of Venda into what Maya Angelou called a daybreak that is wondrously clear. When I learned that Professor Tshilidzi Marwala, one of the most prolific and respected AI specialists in the world, was elected to become rector of the United Nations University, I did not know whether to scream in joy or to cry. I wanted to cry because I was too happy for him. But I also wanted to cry because I knew that the country was losing him. And so I poured my emotions into a celebratory piece in his honor. South Africa is immensely proud to export to the world one of the most beautiful minds ever to come out of this country. In Africa, as it is elsewhere, there is a greater propensity for the honor of sportsmen, military men, political men, and rich men than there is for the honor and recognition for scholars and intellectuals. This is a fresh departure. Bomusanda botovela zwe vazviita hapa namusi ngoho zonakesa, so that we together recognize the seers, the intelligentsia, and to borrow the words of Toni Morrison, the novelist, Nobel laureate, we have come here to honor those who crown us with glory. The four scholar leaders we honor today have given us gifts that cannot be summed up in a few words. Each of them, and each in her and his own way, they give us language with which to make sense of the 21st century. They give us the courage to be what we were never allowed to become. Each in their own way, they tell us that the mind is a terrible thing to waste. Not so long ago, within living memory of many who are in this hall, the architect of Bantu education, Hendrik Verwoerd, said, "There is no place for the Bantu in the European community above the level of certain forms of labor. What is the use of teaching the Bantu child mathematics when it cannot use it in practice? That is quite absurd. Education must train people in accordance with their opportunities in life, according to the sphere in which they live." Were the 4 scholar leaders we celebrate today to reveal their souls, we would find wounds and scars of Bantu education deeply embedded. In terms of what Verwoerd intended, Marwala should be a tractor driver somewhere in a farm in Limpopo today. In terms of what Verwoerd intended, Nthambeleni should be a tree feller somewhere Hamabasha. And Netshituni-Loff would have been a domestic servant somewhere in the leafy suburbs of Louis Trichardt. If Verwoerd had had his way, Professor Tshifularo might have ended up as a night watchman at the well-lit home of a farmer somewhere in this province. What a terrible waste of these brilliant minds that would have been. But that was the precise intention of Bantu education, to waste and to ruin black minds. But the 4 scholar leaders we celebrate today are the spiritual children of the likes of Professor Victor Ralushai, without whose seminal contributions Mapungubwe might not have become a World Heritage Site. The 4 luminaries we honor today, they join the stellar list of such scholars who hail from this province as Victor Richard Silopetema, distinguished South African teacher and journalist, thinker and activist who was born Hamamabulo, the man after whom the township of Kwatema is named. The 4 scholars we celebrate today are taking the baton from Charlotte Manya Matleke, the trail-blazing black woman intellectual, community builder, feminist, and arguably the only woman delegate at the inaugural 1912 conference of the ANC in Mangaung, the first black woman to earn a science degree. She hails from Garamokgopa near Soekmekara. The magnificent 4 whom we celebrate today are the intellectual children of Eskia Mphahlele, a scholar whom the late Don Matera described as a literary luminary, iconoclast, social activist, folk hero, cultural and artistic icon, and humanist to the 9th degree. Such is the caliber of Dr. Netshituni-Loff, Prof. Tshifularo, Dr. Nthambeleni, and Prof. Marwala. They stand shoulder to shoulder with another son of the region, the towering intellectual called Chabani Manganyi, he who dared to speak of being black in the world at a time when it was criminal and dangerous to do so. These 4 whom we celebrate today are the heirs of the work of the likes of Professor Harry Nengwenkulu, that tireless educationist of boundless energy, a black consciousness thinker and an activist of note. And there are many more. So, what is it about this province, this country, and this continent that it should produce such decorated thinkers, intellectuals, professionals, and thought leaders? Is it something in the waters of Limpopo, Levubu, Zambezi, the Congo, and the Nile, and perhaps the Orange River? How does it come about that out of a people who over the past 400 years suffered 1,000 indignities and 2,000 humiliations, how come that out of such a people should come such disciplined thinkers and such dignified personalities as Marwala, Netshituni-Loff, Nthambeleni and Tshifularo. How come? How come that this continent that has been so thoroughly exploited and so frequently burgled is still able to produce these luminaries, epitomes of Africa's resilience and Africa's leadership in thought and in ideas? They stand in continuity with ancient African traditions of thought leadership, traditions that go back to the pharaohs of Egypt, that go back to Queen Nzinga of Angola, Congo, that go back to Kimpa Vita. Our four honorees stand firmly in the traditions of the great African thinkers. When I look at our four honorees, I see the dreams of Edward Wilmot Blyden. I see the face of Marcus Garvey, that fierce orator from the Caribbean. When I look at them, I see W.E.B. Du Bois, that great and majestic, mercurial writer and thinker. I see the beautiful poetic science of Ada Lovelace, who, together with fellow mathematicians Charles Babbage, turned the calculator into the general purpose computer, which have become extensions of our hands. The four scholar leaders we celebrate today, they give us the courage to become what we neither allowed nor imagined ourselves achieving as individuals and as a people. And yes, each of the four, in their own way, they tell us that the mind, especially the minds of black people, is a terrible thing to waste. Since we live on a continent that has produced up to 25 Nobel laureates, with several coming from our own country, why are we surprised at the quality of the characters whom we are honoring today? In the 1980s, Bob Marley sang his redemption song, the words of which are based on a speech made by Marcus Garvey in October 1937, where he said, "We are going to emancipate ourselves from mental slavery because while others might free the body, none but ourselves can free our mind." Allow me to end with what Chinua Achebe has called a charming little Igbo story from Nigeria. One morning, all the animals were going to a meeting to which the town crier had summoned them the night before. Surprisingly, the chicken was headed not to the public square like the rest, but away from it. When his neighbors and friends asked him if by any chance he had not heard the summons to the meeting, the chicken said he had indeed heard, but unfortunately he must attend to a very important personal matter that had just cropped up. He asked them to convey his good wishes to the assembly, and for good measure he added his declaration to support and abide by all its resolutions, even though he would be absent. Now, the emergency before the animals, as it happened, was the rampant harassment that human beings had become to them after a long and heated debate between and among the animals. They accepted and passed unanimously a resolution to offer the chicken to man as his primary sacrificial animal, and it has remained so to this day. Ladies and gentlemen, Africans may not repeat the mistake of the chicken in the Igbo fable. While other nationalities are taking to knowledge like duck to water, we cannot afford not to do the same. The future belongs to those who, through knowledge creation and through education, will shape rather than wait for it. The future belongs to the Marwalas, the Netshituni-Loffs, the Nthambelenis, the Tshifularos. Congratulations, my dear colleagues.